I'd like to call the State Allocation Board meeting to order. If you could call the roll.
Senator Hancock, Senator Weiland, Senator Liu, Assemblymember Buchanan, here. Assemblymember Hagman, here. Assemblymember Nazarian, Esteban Almanza, here. Kathleen Moore, here. Cesar Diaz, here. Irena Ortega.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Great. Let's see. I think the first item is the minutes from the prior meeting.
The minutes are ready for your approval.
Okay. We have a motion by Assemblymember Buchanan and a second by Hagman. All those in favor? Aye. Aye. Let's see. Item number Item number 3 is the Executive Officer Statement.
Yes, we have 4 items to share with you tonight, and a few of them are related to the active fund releases that we've been very active last year and putting funds out in the street. So October 14, 2013, we had the ability to fund $285 million that covers 112 projects. And we had a 90-day deadline in which districts had to submit the appropriate documentation to our office, and that deadline was January 13th. We're happy to share that 110 projects actually did execute and came in for those funds, and so nearly $265 million were released. One project actually did request to rescind, and another project, it was the first occurrence, so they'll be, they have a new date in line, and so they dropped to the bottom of the unfunded list with a new date. The second item I wanted to share is a party funding filing round. The information that we shared at the last board meeting that we had an active round that actually closed December 12th. With that, we had 107 requests, $375 million worth of projects. And out of the number of projects that we had on an unfunded list, we had over $587 million in projects that were eligible. But this is the draw that came in. And so the certifications that did come in, they're valid from January 1st through June 30th. And the next item we wanted to share is an update on the folks that had a second occurrence. There was an active round, and because those folks didn't commit to the last round, they did fail to meet the certification request. So we had 21 projects that did drop from the list. That meant they lost their bond authority, and so as a result, we actually had 5 new projects that are tucked away in the consent agenda, and they'll be represented, and those are 5 new construction projects, so with a total value of over $30 million that will be presented in the consent agenda. And the last item we wanted to share, we did have the announcement that there will be a charter filing round comes the spring, and so we did host a webinar with the Department of Education and the California School Finance Authority, and that was a webinar that actually is archived on our website, and we initially had over 150 registered participants, but at the end of the day we had 56 that actually participated in the online venue. So all the, again, the webinar in itself and any questions and answers will be posted on our website. We are hosting several other events, and next week we'll be joining up again with another online workshop. I apologize.
Great, thanks. Any public comment on the issues? Nope. Thank you. Let's go to item number 4, which is the consent agenda.
And I do want to recognize on the items in the consent agenda that there's annual adjustments for the school facility grants, the biannual index adjustments, for the developer fees, and the adjustments for the items approved this month will be brought forward for an adjustment next month.
Okay. Any public comment on the consent agenda? Okay. All those in favor? Aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Let's see. Item number 5 is the status of fund releases.
So if I can draw your attention to page 87. At the last meeting, we gave some updates with the active 90-day round. And so since we didn't have any updated information to share at our last meeting related to the activities in November, so we have 2 months to share with you as far as the cash being released to projects. So between the activity in November and through the month of December, we had over $162 million that was released for those projects that were within the 90 days. And that's what we have to report for the status of fund releases. And for the status of funds, you have several projects. That's on page 91. We have 3 seismic projects that we're bringing forward for, that was approved in the consent agenda, and so we want to reflect that activity in the unfunded approval line. So $4.4 million that were reflected in Proposition 1D. We had some ORG projects, Overcrowding Relief Grant projects, that were also making some adjustments there. We had a rescission in one project that was being reflected as well, and that's $6.9 million. And again, as I shared with you earlier, there are several projects in the new construction arena in Proposition 55 that were part of the consent agenda. So in total, $34.7 million in process unfunded approvals. We're moving forward as part of the consent agenda, and some adjustments as a result of rescissions, 3 projects that dropped out for $6.9 million. So that's the activity we wanted to share. I wanted to highlight on page 100A and 100B. I know what we have presented in the past to the board is the reflection of the projects that have been processed, true unfunded approvals that we accepted. The board did accept prior to November 1st, and on page 100A and 100B, we wanted to show a drawdown of those projects. We did acknowledge that those projects were in-house and we had processed those, but just a reflection of all the activity we have been moving forward. As project money have been available and rescinded, again, staff is converting those projects to unfunded approvals. So, and that's a reflection in 100A in the new construction category. So far to date, 13 projects have converted from this list and moved over to the unfunded list. And so that's a reflection for the new construction area. Likewise, we have the same activity to share with you. On 100B, the accumulation of modernization projects that we processed, 13 projects have moved over, nearly $26 million have been converted.
Okay, so thank you. Any questions? Yeah.
Just a comment. Your graphs are much, I mean, I think you used every graph in the computer system here and these drawings down. They're very artsy and very good. So I just want to say you can read all of them. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Any public comment on this item? Okay. Let's see. Item 7. This is the Glenn County Office of Education.
So if I can direct your attention to page 113, we are presenting the county office request presently to retain financial hardship savings on 6 previously funded projects. The district is requesting to retain nearly $480,000 on 6 projects that were approved back in the early 2005, which they received funds. And so to date, out of the 6 projects that were awarded, they reported that had nearly $480,000 in project savings. And at the time, we were actually approached by the district to see what they can do as far as retaining the funds. And the regulations are very specific, in which you have the ability to retain the savings if you have another project that you have identified within a period of 3 years. So, or return the funds back. At the time, the district did elect to keep the savings and wanted to apply to a future project. And since then, we were contacted by the district back in 2012. They wanted the ability to retain the funds for some communication towers. And obviously, staff had an opportunity to meet with them and had some concerns about the retention of those funds for that very purpose. And the district subsequently did file an appeal, and unfortunately, from an administrative standpoint, the original appeal came in October, and unfortunately, we didn't have it on the record, and we did locate it much later, but they did submit a subsequent appeal in April of 2013, and staff does acknowledge that the appeal should have had an earlier receipt date. But the County Office of Education, their position was to keep the savings, and from a project standpoint, that they obviously wanted to create these an opportunity for their district to have a wider broadband use and upgraded technology. And it would serve nearly 5,600 students, 8 school districts. Obviously, they live in a rural community. No doubt it would benefit their community, but the regulations are very specific. savings must be used for the next approved project granted by the board. So at this time, staff did recommend that the denial of the request, and that's where we stand administratively. These funds aren't for a subsequent project that has been approved by the board, and at this point in time, the communication towers were never part of the original scope, and administratively, we have denied the request.
Thank you. Any questions from the members? Is there any public comment on this item? Yes. Please.
Good afternoon, and thank you for hearing us and taking on this appeal. My name is Tracy Corney. I'm the County Superintendent of Schools for Glenn County. With me is Randy Jones. He's the Assistant Superintendent, and he's in charge of business services. So we do want to express our appreciation to Juan and all of those buddies that came up, spent some time with us in Glenn County. We took them to Nancy's Elkhorn. They were out of pear pie that day, but we hope they come back and can have a bite with us. They're good people, and kind of highlights what's going on here. We have a need for high-speed internet. Currently, the majority of our students are served by whatever phone company happens to be in that neighborhood. Now it's AT&T. The whole school is receiving 1.5 megabytes per second of internet, and that is to serve all of the students within the school, and it's not nearly enough. It's just not going to get the job done. And we have many, many miles within our county, which makes it even a little bit more frustrating. So one of our districts, I just want to give you an idea of the numbers we're dealing with. One of the districts approached Comcast to ask them if they'd run a fiber line out to their district from the nearest point. It was $300,000 just to run the line out there. That didn't include anything else. Another issue that we face in some of the rural areas is being explored by Scenic. It's a project that's attempting to determine how to get high-speed internet to some of these remote areas. In our neighborhood, they're spending $500,000 in 3 years to do their study. We're proposing to spend $400,000 in 1 year to solve our problem. I think we've got the right solution. We didn't invent the wheel. This was originally done by Imperial County in the southern part of the state very successfully. Exactly what we're proposing is to build towers and beam the internet via microwave to each of the districts and to the schools. And we can then deliver 100 megabytes of service to each of those facilities. That's going up from 1.5. It's a 60-time increase, and it will solve the problem. This gets a little dicey because the state has now mandated that all students, and if you look at the first page in the binder I gave you, the state has legislated Smarter Balanced Assessment System. And that's where every child, when they take their state tests, will test over the internet. If you want to do some math, if you have, say, 400, 500 youngsters in a school, and they're all going to sit down to take this state test, and you have 1.5 megabytes of service, it's not going to happen. You're going to have to spread those tests out over a huge length of time. I did hear one proposal that came out of the State Department of Ed was they would expand the testing window to 12 weeks. That's a third of a school year. So if a youngster tests during the first week, they're going to be at a significant disadvantage to a youngster who tests during the 12th week. So I suggest that isn't a viable solution. Secondly, you can get into an equity issue with the EAP, that's the Early Assessment Program that juniors in high school can participate. What that is, while they're taking the state test, part of that can be comprised of a test that would apply to their SAT and their admission to college. With the internet service we currently have, that's not a possibility. So our students are at a significant disadvantage when it comes to state testing. That doesn't include the incredible disadvantages our students experience in the art of learning. I don't think I have to tell you how many different programs and curricula is available through the internet as compared to that time when this legislation that Lisa's hanging on, or when the funds were originally delivered to us. The world has changed. There are other disadvantages for the students, but I don't want to bore you. I think you can do the math. You've all been students. What I do want to bring to your attention, there were a couple issues that have been presented in California on previous occasion that touch on the issue of equitability and equality of education. The first one I wanted to bring to your attention, if you turn in a couple of pages, is a lawsuit that was called Serrano versus Priest. That came out of Southern California. It was Baldwin Park was suing, saying their kids didn't have the same opportunity in school as youngsters did in other districts that were better funded. For instance, back in that day, and this is many years old, the average daily expenditure for a child in Baldwin Park was $577. In nearby Pasadena, it was $840, and in Beverly Hills, it was $1,232 per year. And the parents of Baldwin Park students said this isn't fair. It went to the state Supreme Court, and the result of that is we now have what is called this ADA, average daily attendance and apportionment system, that every school district operates under in the state of California, except a few which are considered basic aid districts. So this issue has come up before, this issue of equity and equality. The next one, that's like 44 pages down from there, is a case called Lau, L-A-U, and I don't know how to pronounce that correctly, versus Nichols. And that was where a youngster who spoke only Chinese was going to school in San Francisco. And he was not doing very well in school, and his parents said, my child doesn't have an equal opportunity in school because he doesn't understand English. The district, the San Francisco district, said, this education your child's receiving could not possibly be more equal. He's sitting in a classroom right next to another child. It's the same teacher, it's the same chalkboard, it's the same handouts, it's the same curricula. Everything is exactly the same, could not possibly be more equal. That was the position the district took. Obviously, I think you know the end result of that. That case went to the U.S. Supreme Court, and there were several passages at the time in California Ed Code that backed up the district's position. And the U.S. Supreme Court wrote over all of those and said it's not an equal or equitable education for this child, for Lau, L-A-U. And the result of that is now we have nationwide imposition of English language learners, or EL instruction. That's where it began, was at the U.S. Supreme Court. So you go about 18 more pages in here, in my little binder. Am I boring? I hope I'm not boring.
Let me just say this. I mean, I'm speaking for myself, but we're familiar with all these cases. We're familiar with what the schools have to do for next year for Common Core testing. None of that's the issue. None of the stuff you said, I would disagree with you whatsoever. The question is, can we use state 30-year bond money for you to use to put in microwave towers?
Very good.
Okay,
Very
that's the bottom line. And I think if you're going to argue, that's the part I would probably stick with. I understand the inequities. In fact, I'm authoring a bill this year to try to get all the districts some money to get Wi-Fi ready at each campus. We'll see where it goes. But these past things for EquiBuild and stuff like that, I think we're familiar with.
Well, part of the reason I'm here is to get that monkey off my back. I don't want somebody saying I didn't do everything I could for kids in Glenn County, and I got 5,500 of them that could get upset. Okay, let's take a look in here. In the school facility program, looking down into this binder a little bit, this is a publication that came out in May of 2008 by the State Allocation Board. On page 17 of that, it does state, and I'll read for you. The only thing I would say to Assemblymember Hagman is, unfortunately, in this particular instance, you are my only board of remedy for this matter. So I did want to make sure I pointed out for the record that there is a huge equity and equality issue. However, on page 17, under the heading Project Savings, it does state, a district may expend the savings not needed for a project on other high-priority capital facility needs of the district. Regulation further prescribes that the state's portion of any savings from a new construction project or a joint use project may be used as a district matching share requirement only on another new construction project, etc. So it's in your literature that that is stated.
Go ahead, Lee. Yes.
A point of clarification, you can use savings if you have a 50-50 match. When it comes to hardship contribution, where the state is contributing the full project, then there is a regulation specifically related to financial hardship savings. So I want to clarify that point.
And also, this board granted an appeal to the Fresno County Office of Education for the construction of solar panels, and that was a project that you said was completed, and it was after the fact, and you granted the appeal.
That project technically wasn't completed.
It came down to 99% complete, is what we read.
I personally, I think there were issues there. I'm not sure. I mean, where we were, I don't, as much as whether we should have or not, there were different circumstances in that project and in your project. From my perspective, when I travel around even my own assembly district, I'm not sure that any of the school districts that I represent are ready in terms of broadband access. They're not ready. I don't know any of them that have enough computers yet. I don't know any of them that have enough bandwidth, and I think you could travel throughout the state and do that. We're in a situation now where they probably would love to be in your situation where they have leftover financial hardship funds that they could put towards it. But they're not. And we have very clear guidelines on financial hardship. In financial hardship cases, the district funds 100% of a project. And what we ask districts to do, if the cost of that project comes in below the amount that we've funded, is that difference comes back to the state because we funded 100%. What we allow, and I'm not sure we should even do this, but what we allow is if you have, within 3 years, you have another approved financial hardship project, and you do not have an approved financial hardship project, these towers are not an approved financial hardship project, then we allow the district to use that savings from the first project towards the state's share, not for the whole project, towards the state's share of the new financial hardship project, okay? So the issue here to me is simple. There were savings in these projects. You have with 3 years to apply those savings to another approved financial hardship project. We are beyond the 3-year window. The towers are not an approved financial hardship project. So I'm not saying they wouldn't be nice to put up and it wouldn't be nice to use this money, but I think the guidelines are very clear. And we're at the point where we're at the end of the bond. There are other projects that have been in line that are hoping to get funded, and for those reasons I can't support it. I'm very well aware of what we're requiring of districts through Common Core and Smarter Balanced. I know we had a hearing, I chair Assembly Ed, we had a hearing in my committee. Senator Liu chairs Senate Ed, she had a hearing in her committee. And I know it's a monumental task for districts. The governor a year ago came up with some funding. Obviously the state, we're going to have to figure out this problem, but when we figure it out, it's going to have to be for all the school districts in the state, and I don't think in this situation, I can't support this because I don't think I should be, when the rules are very clear, voting for an exception for your district. I mean, there's just nothing here in the policies or procedures for financial hardship that allows us to put the money towards a project that the district wants when it's not even an approved financial hardship project.
Are there any comments from any other board members? Okay, Mr. Corn. Oh, go ahead.
I'm prepared to make a comment and a motion. While we're all working on a future bond measure, and I know other funding sources to ensure that all students have access to the necessary resources, and without creating a broad policy through this motion, we believe this is a unique circumstance that warrants our support. So on behalf of the Superintendent of Public Instruction, I would make a motion to support the Glenn County Office of Education request to use hardship funds for the purposes of providing connectivity to the students of Glenn County for equity purposes.
Is there a second? Okay, I believe that motion dies.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Let's see. Item 8 was postponed, so we'll move to item 9, which is 1.
Madam Chair, members, the next item begins on page 132 of the agenda. This report presents options for the board to consider expanding the requirements to participate in the priorities and funding process. Back in October of 2012, the board took significant steps to promote the advancement of construction-ready projects that have been approved by the board and that have bond authority reserved for them. The board adopted a policy to require new construction, modernization, and facility hardship projects to participate in the priority funding process. Projects that don't participate twice are rescinded, thereby freeing up additional bond authority for other projects. As Ms. Silverman mentioned earlier in her executive officer statement, part of this agenda includes $30 million that was made available through projects that didn't meet that requirement. And just to remind the members, the requirements to participate are that districts have to submit a certification that they can enter into contracts within 90 days of receiving a cash apportionment. The other requirement is that if a district does receive an apportionment, that they have to submit a valid fund release within 90 days. The board approved the regulations for this process in January 2013. So the item before you today presents options for the board to expand those same requirements to the Overcrowding Relief Grant Program, the Career Tech Program, and the Charter School Facilities Program. Now, both the Career Tech and the Overcrowding Relief Grant Programs are out of bond authority for new projects, while the Charter School Facility Program does have approximately $87 million available for new projects, and the board has recently opened up a filing period for charter schools that request the funding. And as with all the previous charter school facility rounds, we do expect to be oversubscribed. We've included some information regarding each of the programs as part of this report. So if I can draw your attention to the middle of page 134, we have a chart that illustrates how many projects and how much bond authority has been approved under the Overcrowding Relief Grant Program. As you can see, there's a total of $153 million bond authority that's been approved in projects, and they're now on this unfunded list waiting for cash. We also listed the dates that these projects were approved by the board. Now, under the current process, the Overcrowding Relief Grant Program is not addressed, which means that these projects don't have to participate in the priority funding process, so the projects can remain on the list indefinitely. Next, on page 135, we have another chart with the same type of information for the Career Tech Program. There's currently 51 projects totaling $57.5 million. The board did originally exclude these projects from participation requirements in the priority funding process. That was due to the unique timelines for Career Tech projects. Basically, they can receive an apportionment in advance of Division of the State Architect and Department of Education plan approvals, with the condition that once they do get a cash apportionment, they have 12 months to come in and submit the plan approvals. And lastly, on page 136, again, same type of information for the charter school program. In this particular case, we have 6 projects totaling $38.8 million. Again, they are on the unfunded list. These projects are considered to be conversions. And just like the Career Tech Program, these projects were excluded the last time that the board took action on this process. The charter school has a slightly different process. They can get a preliminary apportionment, and then they have 4 years with the possible 1-year extension to come in and submit a conversion, which means that they have to have the plans approved by DSA and CDE. At the time of conversion, they're basically just like a new construction modernization projects. Charter schools also have some design and site advances that they can get, and they're on the unfunded list. But staff is not proposing that the board consider these grants because they, the existing statutory timelines, the 4-year plus the 1-year extension, does require them to come in. If they don't, they lose their preliminary apportionment. So staff has included a separate option to include each of the programs individually. The board may choose one or more of the options. Staff is seeking board direction. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions or comments from the board members?
Well, I think there's a presentation from the school district that I represent. So
Okay.
I'd like to hear the board,
Okay.
or hear that
Sure,
presentation.
I'll call for public
Okay,
comment. Just
thank
wanted to
you.
see. Any other questions or comments before we go to public comment? Okay, anyone from the public who wishes to speak on this item, please come on up.
Thank you for allowing us to comment on this item. My name is Eva Luke. I'm the Chief Business Official for Glendale Unified. This is Alan Rising, and he oversees our Planning and Development Division, our facility program. Glendale Unified is here because we are asking the board not to change the regulations that were in place when our projects were adopted and approved. We have 10 overcrowded relief grant projects, and they were all approved in 2013. So they are not old projects. They were approved last year. And those projects comprise 121 classrooms that we are going to be building to replace portables on 10 school sites. And when we were going through evaluating our needs, replacing portables was very high on our list for our local bond that we passed. So we do have the matching dollars. And we've really developed a plan to implement those projects as we move forward in a more paced rate. If we were to go forward with this regulation change, it would require us to really go under construction to implement all 10 projects within a 12-month period. And logistically, that is something that's extremely difficult for us to do. The interim housing, the bidding of the contracts, lining all of that up within a 12-month period really isn't practical and feasible to have a quality projects at the end of the day. We understand that there was a concern about having older projects on the modernization and new construction list, and there was a desire to clear out older projects and allow new projects to be done. And while we support that, we don't really feel that projects that were just approved last year fall into that category. We would like to have some consideration for projects that were approved in 2013 and recently, that there be a period that we have to really be able to facilitate and implement them in a way that we would all be proud of. And I think this issue is unique to us in that we have the 10 projects, and it's odd that we would have 10 projects all in the same cycle. I need to share with you that when our local bond passed at around that same time period, we were told that round 10 of the ORG approval process was looking like it was going to be the last round for ORGs. It was undersubscribed, and there was a desire to potentially move those dollars over into new construction modernization programs. And so we were advised that if we were really interested, we really needed to push forward and get our projects on the list. And so we did that. And we're very pleased that we did. We spent a little over $4 million of local bond money to develop those plans, receive all of the approvals. So we have a significant investment, and we just ask that you take that into consideration. We are committed to doing our projects. We just need a little bit longer time span than 12 months to implement that many projects of that order of magnitude.
Go ahead.
So could you clarify for me when you say a little bit more time, is your plan to do it over 2 years or 5 years, or what is your plan in terms of getting the projects done? Because we sort of assume if someone's applying for funding, they're ready to go with the project. And so
Understood.
that's right. So I'm just kind of curious as to what your time frame is for the 10 projects.
Well, I can explain our original timeline, and then we're going to be amending it. Originally, when we applied, it was really at a time when there was very limited dollars coming into the program. We were actually up here asking you to expedite our one ORG project that's under construction now. There weren't dollars, so we never imagined there would be dollars to do 10 all at once as we were moving forward. And so our original plan was to look at doing it at a pace of 2 per year. We thought if we could do 1 in each of the priority rounds, averaging 2 a year. We can certainly look at expediting that to 2 or 3, but we feel like 3, given the size of some of the projects, would be a reasonable approach.
So if we're oversubscribed, and we hand out the money on a first-come, first-served basis, chances are pretty good that the money will be handed out before you get to projects 4 through 6 and
right.
7 through 10. So how do you respond to that?
My understanding of the process, and I could be incorrect on this, my understanding is that money would not be allocated past the authority that was given through the bond issue. So it would basically be setting aside dollars and saying those dollars are assigned to these ORG projects that are still valid. So you would not be handing out those dollars to another district. Does that make sense?
I think that's a pretty important question here to resolve, so maybe staff can help us understand that, because I think, one view of this plan of doing 2 per year is that you're holding the place in line for 5 years, and that is kind of the question we have here, is whether other projects are ready to go. So I think this question of whether the projects are really, from their point of view, available for that time period, is that accurate?
We were oversubscribed the last filing round. We are going to be bringing back an item before the board to discuss how we fund projects that didn't receive funding in the future, whether the board wants to consider opening up another filing period or just go down the list of the projects that didn't receive funding. So any additional bond authority that becomes available would be part of that discussion in terms of how do we fund future ORG rounds.
I think part of my problem is that, these projects that Glendale is putting forward or put together to put forward before the board were approved in 2013, and what you're asking us to do, the staff is asking us to do, is to change the rules while these folks had the approval. And so, for me, it's could there be a grace period? I mean, it's...
The only reason I ask the question is because some of the projects that are dropping off the list, like for new construction, had approval as well. And so we assume once a district comes to the board asking for an approval, that means that when they're ready to request funds and start their project, and holding out money, I mean, we've never, to my knowledge, just sort of held out money and said, okay, we'll hold this out for you for 5 years. So I struggle with I hate portables. So I know that what you're going to do is make a huge difference in your district, okay? But at the same time, part of the intent of this board and what we're doing is trying to get money to schools, put people to work, and really, put the money in projects that are ready to go. We've never, to my knowledge, held money for any district for that length of time. And the big problem we had, the reason we came up with this, is as long as we were reserving space, because you don't want to reserve, this is what we're trying to get the oversubscribed question issue, you don't want to, we're not approving more projects than we have money in the bank, right?
Correct.
But if we've got projects on that list that aren't ready to go, there's another project that can't come up on the list that's ready to go. So that's why we did it. So I don't know exactly I understand your dilemma and appreciate it, but
There's more.
The difference that I see here in where we were previously, when we put the priorities and funding rounds together, that was our first step that we did in moving away from the 18-month commitment that we had previously when this program started. We started with that step, and then we subsequently went to a step of the non-participation. Both of those steps came with a lot of grief, I think, on many people's parts, and there was a lot of time for people to consider it and come to, I think, a consensus that was how we would move forward. We purposefully left out these 3 programs from the non-participation rounds at the time that we had the opportunity to consider them, and for the very reason that they were not first come, first served programs. They were programs based upon certain criterias and certain acknowledgement that it took a longer period of time to do these types of projects, but we wanted to encourage them. And we had this, this large tent of types of projects. So from what I see in here, with the exception of the 2 that appear that they're going to drop off for other reasons, we have 2013. We have projects that are in 2013. When we took the steps before, we had projects were 5, 6, 7 years on the list that we were addressing. And to me, this could be perhaps premature to look at these 3 categories of projects at this time, and perhaps a year from now we could look at that. It helps with this particular district, not to say that there's others, and certainly the issue will be the ones that are in line want their access to the funds. But I think that we should remain true to these programs, that we gave them additional time. We made a choice a year ago not to put them into this program. People made their decisions accordingly. And now we're going to say, no, we're going to do it this way for good reasons. But I think I can't support it at this time. Perhaps a year from now, I could support it.
Mr. Admin.
Well, I think you could do all the above, so to speak. I do think there needs to be timelines on projects. There's no sense of having districts be approved and waiting multiple years before they actually start a project. That's not the intent of this bond money. It's not the intent of the administration. That's the intent to get the bond monies out to get people working. Plus, every good district has a story, but every district needs money right now. Every district can use some money for some kind of program, like our last appeal as well. I would love to give all our school districts enough money to get all their IT stuff working and all the rest of it. So there is a limited amount of capability what we could do. We're looking at a snapshot in time here today. What can we do today? What can we do to maximize those funds to get out today? You may be able to approve these 3 changes, which frankly I support because I want to get these monies moving, maybe starting at a different time. Maybe start 6 months from now or 3 months from now to give some time to reaction for the districts. But I can't also approve 5 years from now. 5 years now, we may be going through 2 more bond cycles by then. Who knows?
And I
if
would not
everything's
ask
well.
for 5.
Yes. So that's not right either. That's not right to everybody else who's waiting in line after the fact. There needs to be a finite period of time that when you do apply, you're ready to go. Otherwise, let's let someone else who is ready to go, who can service their students today, not a couple years from now, so those benefits go out as quickly as possible. So taking what Ollie said, there may be a way. I support all 3 changes, but what would be a reasonable time to give notice to those schools who have projects approved right now? Is it another 6 months? I don't know, a year from now.
Well, I would suggest that maybe we postpone action on this item at the present time because of the confusion and ask staff to come back with other recommendations of how we can resolve this problem with the 3 particular categories that we're concerned with.
But if you don't take some kind of action now, the same problem is going to come up with another district 6 months from now, because then that's when we bring it up. So, well, we were still working on the same rules. If you change the rules now but give enough notice for people to react, then I think that's the fairest way to do it. If we don't take action now, we aren't giving our opinions. We're not even sure if we're going to vote for this if we look at it 6 months from now. And then we say we want to do it now. It's the same issue as doing it today. So if our intention was to have this out within 90 to 180 days to start construction, that gives this school district time to go back and say, can we get 7 of the projects going in the next 6 months before this rule changes, then another 90 days past that. It gives you some time to react. At the same time, we're setting the rules out for the future. Just an idea.
Lisa?
Point of clarification, even if the regulations, the policy discussion happens today, staff would still have to come back with some proposed regulation change. And then additionally, built on that, if the board does approve those approved regulation changes, we still have to go through the administrative process of having those rules or the regulations adopted. So even if it was adopted on an emergency basis, potentially it wouldn't go into effect until, at best case, maybe June. And then you still have certification rounds that you still have to implement. And those certification round periods would open up, again, if it's adopted in June, maybe miss that last certification round. The first certification round it would have to meet would be the November to December period of 2014. Subsequent round would be spring 2015 is when they have to submit a certification. So you still have a lot of time.
So you're looking at
built in.
18 months at best case right now?
All right, now, potentially.
Well, since we're looking at 18 months,
You're looking at 1 year.
1 year.
Because this is January of 2014. So if the next round is this fall, and the subsequent round is in the start of 2015, that's 1 year from now.
But the certification's valid from the period of July 1st through the end of December.
well, where I am is, I'm not comfortable waiting 5 years, because if I'm a district that has an ORG program and I'm told, well, we're holding money for a district for 2 more years, I'm not comfortable with that. I also, though, can support Senator Liu's recommendation that we at least, even if we just delay it for another meeting, if we could have the additional data that people know, you can draw out the charts on what that means in terms of the process and all of that. I think it would give all of us a higher comfort level in terms of having a thorough understanding of what that means for districts. And my message to you, and I have no idea if I'm in the majority or the minority here, but I know when I was on school board, I would have moved mountains if I had to get these projects done. So,
Could I respond just to one comment? Truly, our 5-year plan was our initial. This is what we had originally scheduled to do. We fully understand, given this oversubscribing to the program that's going to be occurring, that we need to condense that down.
Right.
So I don't want you to hold that to the heart. I think
I'm
there's
not
just
holding.
that
I'm just saying is I can
interest of having
support taking a
bit of
little
grace.
taking a little bit more time, and you know, within that, whatever we decide on there, because I do think the intent is to fund get projects out, because your portables, you want to replace yours just like District B wants to replace its, and District C wants to replace its portables. And so I think you can, maybe if we bring it back, we can draw out the timeline and what it means, and maybe you can provide us a little bit more information of how we're oversubscribed or whatever, and then we can
Make a better decision.
have a little bit longer discussion.
Lisa, one question of clarification. If this comes back next month, it wouldn't really change the implementation timeline too much in terms of the effective, because what we're talking about now, there's a delayed effective date anyway because of the administrative law process. So, but coming back in February won't make a significant change?
No.
Okay.
No.
I will say I'm supportive of including all 3 of the programs in the process. I think that I don't think that first of all, we have the precedent, and secondly, I don't think that it was ever intended that a district would sort of look at their capital plan and kind of hold out the projects for the time period that it's more feasible for them to implement the plan, recognizing that that's a reasonable way for you to do it. I don't think that's a reasonable way to tie up the funds in the programs. So I am supportive of moving forward on this. I would support moving forward on it today, but if there isn't a motion today, then that's fine too, but I would like to see it in February. Go ahead.
I'm supportive of all 3 too at this point, and whether we do it today or next February, I think the built-in timeline, just because it takes so long to do things, gives enough adequate notice to school districts. I think even if we approve the general concept here, we'll still get a report back when the language is done. Is that correct? So we would take another stab at it, and we could also input as far as the effective date or the next funding round and those type of things. I think we have another bite at the apple as we go. But if the staff needs more time to work on some of the language, if there's consensus, at least get started on it, even if we don't officially approve it today. I think we should give as much notice as we can.
Let me ask
and to
if
our
there is a
districts as well.
motion
I'll move.
today.
All 3.
Okay, so let's go ahead and take a vote on that. So let me just clarify, the motion is to approve the process for add the 3 programs to the funding process, And the staff would, on the natural, come back with the draft regulations, which would give us the opportunity to talk further at that point. But today would be approving the policy change and directing staff to go back and make those.
And that gives much the most notice we possibly can for the school districts right now, and not do it all in one day.
So, even though I support it, wouldn't it make sense when we approve the policy change to really have an understanding of how that policy is likely to be implemented and what the dates are going to be?
Well,
So especially when it doesn't, especially when it's a 1 month isn't going to impact it, so we're really clear on that.
I would think so, and I think it would also give time to go back and make sure that every district that's going to be affected knows, and they either have a chance to move up their timeline or understand why it's happening.
Do you have a notice?
So if there was
Maybe a notice process during this time period too? Is that
seems
something
to
you
me
could do?
there should be. So I was even wondering if a month was enough time. I mean, I would agree with Assemblywoman Buchanan, and if there was a motion to say that we're going to receive this report and ask that staff come back with the wording of the change, but also inform all the affected
School
districts that this is their opportunity to either accelerate what they're going to do or realize that they may lose the money.
Mr. Dees.
Also, just to add on to that, I mean, so we're talking about policy change. Would it be helpful to convene a meeting with the implementation committee so that districts do have the opportunity to participate in that development? And this is a question of staff.
Isn't that normally done after we, no, it's not done, okay, well.
I agree with extended timeline, because again, what I would reiterate is that getting to the point with all the other projects, we didn't do it in one meeting. We had subcommittee hearings actually, and then we came forward with board recommendations. So there was a lot of notice to districts about a potential policy change that would have a great effect upon them. And I think in that manner, we tried to bring everyone along. To me, this is one board meeting, one notice. There might be many districts out there that don't know this policy discussion is going on today. Obviously, your district does. And I would support additional time to provide that type of input from districts.
Madam Chair, if we approve the general recommendations today and we bring back either in February some draft formats, can we ask staff to bring us a report of how many districts this may affect and ask them to notify them for comments before that time period? And that would cover all the bases. I'm still looking at next year before this stuff even takes effect. So the more notice we give these districts that this is going that direction, I think the better off they are. So that's mainly what we're also trying to say here, is do they have enough time to react and get their capital improvement plans in swing? And if we gave them, starting the draft stuff, how long would you think your staff would take to make the draft regs?
We can anticipate coming back maybe in March.
So you start in January here. You give notice the next couple of weeks to everybody on that list who may be affected. You say you're going to have a meeting in March where you're going to go over the regs. They can come out and give us their input, and at that time, because they'll be public documents, they have a chance to look at their stuff. It gives them 60 days to kind of look at their construction period. You take effect. It takes another 3 or 4 months before the regs go into effect or through the process, the administrative process. Your first round is in September, October, November. That's the first certification round. The second one comes up beginning of the first of the year. It's another 90 days after that. That's a lot of notice. That's a lot of notice. Anybody that you may be talking about. So, I mean, you're here. You know about right now. Would that timeline allow you to adjust what you may do when that it would work with you or not? Is that a fair notice for the process?
Because of our number of projects, that's truly our challenge. Can we put 2 or 3 or more on and get it through? Yes, but to do 10 within a 12-month period, that's our challenge.
Yeah,
it is,
and that's
so
probably
huge.
why most districts don't apply for 10 projects at once, too. They do 1 or 2 at a time, if at that, or unless they're like one of the big ones like LA Unified that has a whole crew.
We were advised the program was going away, and we really needed to get our applications in.
What about, I mean, what the time frame you were talking about is a most likely that the first strike period would be this fall. What if it moves to the 1st of 2015 so that they have 2 strikes in latter 2015 if they don't move projects?
So I want to go back to suggesting that I think there's, when you hear people talking, there's support for getting money out and not just giving one district a reservation. So today we can try ourselves to solve this, or staff can come back to us in February or March and lay it out with when the rounds would be, and at least then it'd all be in front of us, and we'd all have an understanding of exactly what we're voting on.
So in that respect, there's no need for a vote today?
Well, I'm going to suggest 2 things. Mr. Hagman could withdraw his motion, and we can talk about this again in February with maybe some more information about exactly what the timeline would be for effectiveness, when the first strike would come, all of those kind of questions, and that would give at least another month for people to hear about this issue and get some more input. The second option is to call the question and see how that shakes out and move on from there. So I'm gonna put Mr. Hagman on the spot.
I'm at the pleasure of the board. I think either one gives the same amount of timeline. I think the longer we get the staff to work on the language, I don't think it makes a difference if we're all there.
So
anyway.
let's go ahead and take a vote on the motion.
Okay.
Okay, Senator Hancock. Senator Liu. Assemblymember Buchanan. Assemblymember Hagman. Assemblymember Nazarian. Esteban Almanza.
Aye.
Kathleen Moore. Cesar Diaz. Irina Ortega.
Aye.
Okay, this motion does not carry.
So at the chair's discretion, I'm going to ask that the item come back in February with the more detailed analysis that you've heard from various members on the board, and I think we can perhaps figure out how to move forward then.
Definitely.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your consideration.
Okay, let's see. Item number 10 is Assemblymember Buchanan. You're on the spot for item number 10.
We spent over a year taking a look at the various programs that we fund through the State Allocations Board. We've taken a look at how we determine eligibility, a number of projects, and I just want to sort of go over some highlights and then answer any questions. I don't want to spend an hour reading the report to you, but some of the highlights with respect to new construction eligibility. It was clear to us as we looked at numbers that, especially having been through a significant transition period, recession with the housing market, that we need to have school districts reestablish their eligibility. And so that is a proposal going forward if we do have a new bond. With respect to funding, the major recommendations or observations we have is we believe there's a desire to come up with a better definition of a classroom. Right now, the idea that the classroom has to be exactly 960 square feet for, loading factor 25 or 27 students, where a district may want a classroom that's just under 3,000 square feet for 3 times that number of students, but our regulations only allow us to fund 1 classroom. That some of that is outdated, and we have a recommendation, therefore, that we take a look at these definitions, even with respect to online learning and others, and that we conform with the Title V. With respect to portables, and this crosses over with both new construction and modernization, we don't believe that it's a wise use of state taxpayer dollars to fund portables. I'm talking about the wheel-on portables that we've seen throughout the state, particularly the explosion that came after class size reduction. So we believe that we should not be using new construction dollars to fund the portable classrooms, and I will speak to that a little bit more when we move down to modernization. We also, moving on to modernization, the major finding there with eligibility is that this is another area where we should reestablish eligibility, counting all the facilities and classrooms on a campus or that a district has, and along with the age, and reestablish that. We believe that when we look at funding, we need to consider whether we should have a very strict interpretation of funding like we do now, or whether we should be a little bit more flexible, because very few schools have a situation where the enrollment equals the capacity of the school. And to give you an example, you could have a special day class with a capacity of 15 students, and you only have 12 students this year. You might have 15 students next year, but it costs the same to modernize that classroom whether you have 12 or 15, and it's much more cost effective if you've got a contract to go in and do the whole building at one time rather than parts of the building. So we didn't give a specific recommendation in terms of how you would modify the formula, but we believe there should be some consideration that if a building is at, or a school is at 90 or 80 or 85% capacity, that we then provide funds to modernize all of the buildings. We also believe that modernizing the roll-on portables is not a good expenditure of state dollars, and we should not be using modernization funds to do that. We would propose actually providing new construction funds to replace the portables so that we actually have stick-built buildings that last a much longer time frame. We looked at consolidating all the special programs and thinking that there may be on average a certain amount that all districts get, and we could come up with one funding amount instead of trying to break it down into many, and came to the conclusion that most of them are unique, and the one area that we felt could be consolidated both in the modernization and new construction was in the area of the fire alarms. With respect to facility maintenance, we do believe that there should be some sort of requirement or effort on the parts of school districts to adequately maintain their facilities, because ultimately the care you take actually adds to the life cycle and reduces the cost of modernization down the road. We believe there should be a statewide school facilities inventory, and we listened to Jeff Francis and a number of different people talk about this, but it's sort of ironic that in the state of California, we can't tell you, really how many schools or classrooms or types of buildings that we have, or the age of the buildings, and that we are not looking at an inventory that gets down to how many electrical outlets you have or how old certain fixtures are. The kind of inventories that some districts actually use to manage their maintenance programs, but we're looking at a high-level inventory that would help us even as a state better plan, because we know how many schools were 30, 40, 50 years old and hadn't been modernized, and we'd be able to compare enrollments with capacity and have a better idea of how many additional classrooms we had. Financial hardship program. We believe the financial hardship program should be a program of last resort. So one area in particular is right now you can qualify for financial hardship. If you're at 60% of your bonding capacity, we believe you should be at 100% of the bonding capacity. But overall, we need to take a look at that program. But we also recognize right now we talk about a bonding capacity of $5 million or less, and we believe there's got to be some way of redefining the regulations so that, if a district is within, Senator Hagman gave the example, if a district is within a couple $100,000 or so of its bonding capacity, do we really want it to go out and have an election? You could, and I don't know, the $5 million seemed arbitrary, I don't know what the right number is, but if you had a bonding capacity, say, of $2 million and your, or say $6 million, but the modernization of a high school is going to cost $10 million or whatever, there's got to be some way that there's reasonableness and flexibility, but still holding true to financial hardship, again, being a program of last resort. With respect to county offices of education, we recognize that they are financial hardship, but we also recognize that districts that participate in county-wide programs should also have an obligation or responsibility to help fund the facilities that their students use. And let me just give you a simple example. If you have a district, I'll use like West Contra Costa in Senator Hancock's district. West Contra Costa is its own SELPA. So that means for its special needs students, when it plans its school, it has to plan include the plans for special day classes or programs for students with autism. I mean, it has to plan that, and it has to be an integral part. And the district, even participating in state programs, has to contribute its matching share in order to access the state dollars. If you have other smaller districts that participate in the Alameda County SELPA, okay, right now the county can apply for financial aid to add a special day class, and those districts aren't required to make the same kind of contribution, even though the students in those programs come from the districts, and the districts ultimately are the ones that have responsibility for their education. And so you'll notice that in this area we give the example because we believe that in programs like that serve students in participating districts, those participating districts should also have some kind of obligation to help fund the county share of those programs. It shouldn't be a free pass because they're in a county program, and we believe that will also force better planning on the part of the districts to help take care of, design facilities that can meet the needs of unique populations. And finally, our analysis shows that there clearly is a need for a school facilities bond, and we come to the conclusion that the last one, if you take a look at it, we've had $35 billion, I believe, that's been passed through state bonds, and we've had $66 billion that has been passed through local bonds. Many of these local bonds are passed on, by voters because they understand that it will be leveraged with state bonds, and another $10 billion from developers in developer fees. So that $35 billion has leveraged $76 billion in local and private funds to rehabilitate the schools in the state of California. So I don't know if any of the other members would like to add, but we also recognize that it's not the role of this body to pass legislation, and so we're happy to answer any questions, and what we ask is that the committee accept the report.
Any comments or questions?
Oh, do we have to move to accept the report, or can we just say we accept it?
I think it would just be an
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I think it's an incredibly thoughtful and well-done report, and to really commend the committee for doing it. In some of the separate, some of the separate programs, the special program funding, I think that's an interesting way to put it. I think we should really look, though, at consolidating as many of them as we possibly can, i.e. you should seismically upgrade if you need to, if you're doing modernization or new construction. And frankly, now that we have the new green code, schools are building to higher quality, but we could also require the high-performing schools, because that has some things that aren't in the green code or even in our new energy codes, like windows that open, which have been proved in testing to increase math and reading scores. Healthy, really healthy schools.
I'm smiling because whenever we met with architects in our school district, we would say, we want windows that open.
Yeah, and, but all of those things would probably be better served, some of those very basic things about health and safety and saving money in the long run, like energy efficiency does, would be best served if they were simply required when the state helps pay for something.
And I don't necessarily disagree with you. We just felt some of those decisions were probably out of our jurisdiction, but I mean, in seismic, when we had the seismic committee, it's sort of like if a school is unsafe to be occupied, I mean, to me, you're talking about new construction. I'm not sure we should have all the separate parts.
Right. No, I think that's right, and I agree with you too that what we're talking about is the need for legislation if and when a new bond comes forward.
Mr. Hagman?
Well, I just want to thank Ms. Buchanan and the staff, frankly. I mean, it's been a year out of our life here. For those of us serving this subcommittee, I don't know how many meetings or how many hours of study and discussions. Not that everything was black and white, but there's a lot of consensus built in for all those who participated. I mean, the overall is that this program basically works. It's been working for a while. There's minor tweaks we'd like to see to make sure that things are more equitable and fair as possible in the way it goes through, and for perceived or real taken advantage of or not, make sure those things aren't there. But it was very comprehensive, and for someone like myself who's pretty fiscal conservative out there for state dollars, it was something that it really reinforced that this program is worthwhile to keep going in the future somehow, and that it has done a lot of good. And I think to be a partnership with the school districts, a true partner, that's exchanging information, is trusting each other, which I think the more steady this program goes and the more, as well as been managed over the last few years, I think that level of trust would be built up between the districts and the state departments where that information can be shared properly. I think there's a lot of things we have to be looking at as a legislature to make sure we're flexible enough to handle the changes in the future. Like right now, we're asking for a Common Core, but we don't have the right data to know what that's going to take to get people to actually do all that. So the built-in the data gathering systems is something we've been talking about for a long time, so we can make educated decisions and educated choices, both on this board and the legislature coming up in the future. But it was very well done. I'd like to thank for including me, Madam Chair and Madam Sub-Chair, for all the different days, and I think you did an excellent job. Thank you.
Thank you, and I too want to just add my voice to thank the subcommittee for fine work, and would be pleased to accept the report. I do know that the governor's budget summary outlined maybe a little twist to the conversation about the future of school facilities funding, even questioning the role the state would play. So I think this is an ongoing dialogue, and it would be an interesting place to be in the future here. So thank you, John.
I just wanted to quickly also thank for the opportunity to participate in the discussion and compliment our chair because it was a tremendous amount of information and a tremendous amount of input, and compliment the staff on the report. I also wanted to compliment, we had a lot of testimony. We'll continue to have testimony, I think, on this issue. We've had 2 letters that we received concerning it, and wanted to thank the public for participating in the process. It was very transparent and public, and I know we'll go forward as a foundational document as a bond discussion goes on in the future. Thank you.
So thank you, Assemblymember Buchanan, and the committee members. And I want to also thank the staff, and I do want to ask if there's any public comment on the. Yes, please.
Good afternoon. I'm Jenny Hanna, and I'm Vice Chair of CASH, Coalition for Adequate School Housing, and I'm from the Kern County Superintendent of Schools office. So I represent a unique area that I sometimes jokingly refer to as Middle Earth, the state of California, that is a very different area in terms of what our school districts are able to do locally to prepare for capital improvements, modernization, and preparing for growth, of which my understanding is in the next 10 years we're centered to be a growth area for the state. So a statewide school facility program is very important to us, as I'm sure it is to a lot of districts in California, but uniquely to Central Valley and our school districts. So I also want to thank the committee and Senator Buchanan for doing the heavy lifting on, or excuse me, Assembly Member Buchanan, sorry, I elevated you. Congratulations. For doing the heavy lifting on this work. And we all know this is a complicated program, and to go through it and to detail out as much as was done, especially with the public hearing, and for allowing us as school districts and folks to come forward and give you our comments. We know that we've been in violent agreement with you at times and in friendly disagreement with you at times. And as Kathleen Moore mentioned, CASH did submit a letter in response to the report. Well, we hope that you all have received that, and we'll make sure that everyone has copies of that. We've been here, we've dialogued with you. We want to continue to do that as a membership group. We think that's really important to keep the communication open. We recognize that much of what we comment on and input about will impact this program and what the state will do about expenditures for a school facilities program. And what I want to leave you with is what our organization believes is to be one of the items that clearly maybe needs more work is more discussion about grant development on the modernization or capital renewal or whatever we want to call it in terms of our older school facilities infrastructure, our schools and equity and all of the things that are tied up in providing good education for all of our kids in California will really be centered around what we do with a modernization program, I believe, in the state. And I think that new construction is kind of a whole clean issue, a little easier to deal with and talk about how the state's match is going to be allocated on that. But a modernization or capital renewal program is going to be a little messier, and it's going to take a lot of work and a lot of attention to what do we need to include in that program that has been left out in the current program. Because I think as our organization believes that the current grant does not adequately address our infrastructure requirements in a mod program. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Brandon Kitagawa, and I'm with Regional Asthma Management and Prevention. And we've been working with a network of health and school health and equity stakeholders, and have been sort of reviewing the discussion around the program. And we too would like to commend the subcommittee and the staff for spending over a year really exploring and examining the program. I think these recommendations take several steps forward from a health and equity perspective, and wanted to highlight. We highlighted those in a letter that we submitted, and just wanted to highlight them quickly here. I think most importantly, we were really happy to see the subcommittee address the maintenance issue. I think the disinvestment in day-to-day maintenance has been a big issue for health and equity issues, and its disassociation with construction and modernization money, has played a part in unhealthy school facilities. And so we're really happy to see this subcommittee recognize that and try to recommend connecting those funding sources. Second, we really support the recommendations around eliminating funding for portable classrooms or incentivizing the replacement of portables with permanent structures. And while we like to have seen more recommendations around the assessment of conditions of school facilities, we're really supportive of the idea of doing a basic school inventory that I think can really help evaluate the program in the future and assess future needs. Like I said, overall, we support the recommendations. We do think that there were a few places that could have pushed health and equity further. I think we were probably most disappointed in that to not significantly discuss the current approach of funding on a first come, first served basis. I think given the statement in the governor's budget that it should be an issue that I imagine the legislature will take up moving forward. I think we were concerned that the recommendations around the financial hardship program, we just want to make sure that whatever, sort of the devil's in the details. And so whatever actually comes out, doesn't, that change doesn't come at the cost of, housing students and staff in facilities that aren't really healthy for them. And I think finally, while we understand that this board isn't making recommendations on the size of potential bond or anything like that, we would encourage a recommendation that the proportion that that's of that money that goes to modernization increase, sort of reflecting the projected change in enrollment growth. So again, I thank the subcommittee for all their work, and we look forward to the process moving forward.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is, thank you for allowing me to take some time to speak. My name is Glenn Owens. I'm a board member of the School Facilities Manufacturing Association and a recent board chair. We also want to commend the subcommittee for the work that they went through. I myself attended many of the meetings. I attended meetings on behalf of SFMA with Assemblymember Buchanan, met with Assemblymember Hagman's staff. Really appreciated the openness and the opportunity to be a part of the dialogue. So that was quite good. I want to reiterate the SFMA position. It was mentioned as one of the letters that came to the subcommittee. In that we believe that, and I think you as well believe that permanent modular construction is certainly a positive part and a positive choice for school districts as part of future funding facilities due to their design flexibility, the speed of the delivery, the inherent green construction methods, and the strict compliance to code, including the California Green Code. We think they are extremely valuable and flexible options for school districts now and in the future. We think they should be included as part of future funding consideration and available to school districts. The issue, I think, is what defines the difference between permanent modular and a portable building, and I think that's somewhat of a gray area that needs continued dialogue because we're not sure that, regardless of how many of each of their components are delivered to their site at once, they're still made under the same strict manufacturing guidelines and codes that are required. So we appreciate the opportunity again to be a part of the dialogue, and we thank you for the consideration.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just, as we draw to the close on this item, I also want to extend my deep appreciation to staff for all of its work. I have a binder that doesn't include 2012, but of all the reports that you put together, and they were very well done, very professional, and the information you provided, I think, was just invaluable in helping us better understand the program and come to the conclusions that we did. So I am very grateful for all the work you did. And then to those who served on the subcommittee, Ms. Moore, Mr. Diaz, Mr. Almanza, Senator Hagman, and Senator Nazarian came to some of the later committees because he's new to the meetings because he's new. But it's pretty amazing that I think with the exception of people being sick 1 or 2 days, even the meetings we had during the interims, during the recess, everyone showed up and stayed for the whole meeting. And if a couple of them we had to start 10 minutes late because Mr. Hagman's plane got in late, but he made the effort to come up from Southern California so that everybody participated at every meeting. And I think ultimately you get better results and a deeper understanding and a better path to move forward when you can have that kind of rich participation. So it was very informative for me, and I appreciate all the work that everyone did, and hopefully we'll have people agree with us that this is a great program, and we need to find a way to ensure that it continues into the future.
Thank you. So with that, the report will be accepted, and we'll move to item 11, which is Lisa.
You know, it's getting late here, but I wanted just to give the board an update. Again, this is just a report, just a reflection of some of the activities that the board did accomplish in 2013. A good deal of a lot of the work that we did serve, obviously associated with the Program Review Subcommittee. So thankful for that opportunity. But again, as far as the funding process, we have unfunded approvals and apportionments, and the fact that we convert projects into cash and opportunities for school districts. There's also that activity of some of the closeouts, the rescissions that happen on the fiscal side of the shop that also need duly noted. Those program funds do get reverted back to providing additional funds to projects that are waiting on the waiting list. But in total, out of the $35 billion authorized to the voters, we are close to $34 billion of funds being issued, and over 1,100 projects have been received awards in this program. So again, a significant amount of accomplishments in the program since 1998. As far as board meetings, I know we were on a standard month-to-month basis with some of our meetings, but some of those meetings we had to have, they were abbreviated meetings as a result of the workload considerations, and primarily to put out cash. When we had a bond sale, we had the opportunity to have just consent-only agendas, and again, that provided opportunities, saving some of the members some time, also providing some quick opportunities to take action and award projects. Some cash. As far as the appeals, the summary of appeals that we had, 26 that were logged in 2013, over half of them were dispensed administratively, 4 were withdrawn, and again, that's an active role that we've been playing to try to resolve some of the issues before you. And the chart of the funding process and the application since the change in our process with the 90-day filing requirements for participating in a bond sale for the certification process. Once the funds are released and awarded to a district has 3 to 4 years to complete their project. And once those 3 to 4 year timelines have been achieved, where we've received a final expenditure report and 100% of the activities have wrapped up, then again, there's that ability to come back and review the project as a compliance mechanism. But the accomplishments, as stated on page 191, again, the approvals the board provided was nearly $300 million. For 2013, a significant amount of the activity related to the Overcrowding Relief Grant Program and the project funds that we had available. And several seismic projects did go through with approvals, over 12 last year. So again, trying to get some significant outreach and some opportunities to school districts in relation to those program funds. And as far as the chart we have on 192, nearly over $900 million were awarded the ability to access the cash. So quite a significant amount of projects moved over from the unfunded list, and we had cash available for them. And on page 193, again, the significant amount of nearly over $1 billion awarded to projects when we had bond funds. So again, that's great news. They actually did receive cash in their hands. And as far as the closeout and the rescissions that we have noted, nearly $25 billion or over $25 million, I apologize, not billion, $25 million were reverted back to the program funds. So again, that gives us the ability to knock off some of those projects on that true unfunded list and move those over to unfunded approvals. As far as the policy meetings, yeah, we had 9 policy meetings related to the Program Review Subcommittee, 31 items that we published, and an aggressive pace towards the end. Push the gas pedal, and we had to move, so it was great. And we had 3 regulations that were approved by the board. A couple more charts we wanted to share. As far as the true projects that had an unfunded approval, we had processed nearly $420 million. And as I shared with you today, in the financials, we have that new chart, how we are migrating some of those projects off the list. And so those folks that are on the true unfunded list, this is a reflection of that workload. But we also wanted to share with you the stat on page 196. These are the applications we can't process. The board did take a position of not to process applications, but we do have an acknowledged list of those projects, and these are just estimates, projects with the value of $335 million in both the new construction and modernization area. And then we have some nice illustrations, attachments that show you the distribution of program funds by county and the enrollment associated with that. And with that, I'll open it up to any questions.
Any questions? Go ahead.
Madam Chair, maybe the staff can answer this too. I was kind of thinking about this as we wind down of bond funds. If I'm correct, doesn't the administration decide it gets funded out of the bond proceeds, correct?
Right.
Okay, so if I'm taking this logically, if we stopped and we ran out of money today, and of all the stuff in the queue, you probably have 4 or 5 years worth of follow-up administrative work at the bare minimum to close out and be fiscal stewards of those projects. Look at the average time.
Yes, beyond that, yes.
So I'm wondering, I know we do, yeah, we do our budgets every year, and I'm just kind of thinking this through. If we don't get a new bond funded, is the administration socking the money away, or is that something we should be thinking about now? Because if you can't spend all your money, then have nobody watching the till while these things are being built.
I think it's a legitimate issue to start thinking about as we have the conversation throughout the year about the future of the program. But I think the specifics of how that would be handled would be proposed in a future budget.
Well, if we went out this year, it should be in probably this budget, or at least among the board members, we should carve out a certain set of money at the bare minimum. This is the stopgap to keep the follow-up process going. If so, we need to give that direction to our staff not to allocate past that amount unless you plan to replace it somehow, or with general funds, which I don't think this government's going to do. So I think at least we should figure out where that pot of money should be coming from out of the different bond funds, what that limit would be at the maximum or minimum, whatever you want to look at it. If we were to stop today funding new projects, how long would that go? And then only allocate up to that limit. But that should be established before we get down to 0, 0, 0 in all the tanks to make sure that our fiscal stewards can follow these projects over a period of time.
To my knowledge, what the process has been in the past is that the State Allocation Board approves the budget, and then it goes into the budget process. And the last action we took was over a three-year period, funding through 14-15.
I think the governor takes a whack at it too.
Yeah, the governor proposes a set aside for the budget, and the Budget Act, as proposed, did conform with the board's action that it took a few years ago. So I think the allocation set aside for the 14-15 budget does coincide with the action the board takes.
But we're taking a 1-year look at it each time we do a budget on our side, the state budget.
Right.
Where I'm saying is if we're projecting unless we really drag this out at the end of this year, our funds will be practically gone, or at least obligated. I'm talking about 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, whatever it takes to complete their administrative duties. at least we should not allocate past that minimum amount if it's coming out of the same source we're funding people out of. And that, I don't know. That's, I'm hoping that you guys and the budget people can
Duly
start
noted,
looking at
and
it.
I think a large part of this conversation is more appropriate for the budget subcommittee, but I think we
Yeah, 'cause it
will
won't be
certainly think
one-year
about what
allocation.
the
It's be a
raise.
freeze of multiple years
Certainly.
for the stuff. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Go
moving
ahead.
on.
Next item.
Is the joint use update. We had been producing quarterly reports just to provide an update of some of the funds that we dispersed in the joint use area. And again, we still have one project that still is have cash set aside for them, and the ability to access cash is there. And so we're waiting for one project, Santee, and they have until December to come in for to activate the cash. So we have been have regular communications with them, and they're giving us some sort of reassurances that they're going to come in. And the next is the workload. We have the workload projection for the next 3 months, and we also have the 90-day the log on the appeals. So if we have any questions, and a few more assignments to add on there
from the board members. Any other public comment? Okay, I think that's it. We will stand adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.